The footage is grainy, black and white, the kind that plays in courtrooms and on evening news. A woman in a black dress stands from a corner booth. Auburn hair catches the overhead light. She moves toward three men crowding a young couple's table. What happens next takes 15 seconds. The first man's body hits the floor at 21, 47, 39. The second follows at 21, 47, 44. The third goes down at 21, 47, 48. 15 seconds. Three bodies. One woman who never raised her voice. The timestamp freezes. The woman's face fills the frame. Calm, controlled, almost bored. The desert heat shimmered across the Kuwaiti sand like water you couldn't drink. February 1991, and Corporal Franklin Castellano figured he'd seen the last sunrise of his life. His SEAL team was pinned. Iraqi Republican Guard holdouts, the ones too stubborn or too stupid to surrender, had them locked in a kill box. Rounds snapped overhead with that particular crack that meant they were close. Too close. The kind of close where you stop thinking about tomorrow and start thinking about the last thing you want to remember. Frank pressed himself into the sand, radio mic to his lips. His voice stayed steady even as his heart hammered against his ribs. 23 years old and already too familiar with this feeling, the razor's edge between living and dying, where everything slows down and speeds up at the same time. Viper 2-1, this is ground team actual. Need immediate close air support. Danger close. How copy? The response came through his headset, a woman's voice. Calm, professional. The kind of calm that only comes from someone who's done this before. Ground team actual, Viper 2-1. I copy danger close. Mark your position with IR strobe. I'm 3 minutes out. Frank's team leader, Chief Warrant Officer Mike Brennan, looked at him like he'd lost his mind. That's a woman pilot? You got a problem with that right now, Chief? Brennan spat sand. Just keep your head down, Frankie. 3 minutes felt like 3 hours. The Republican Guard had them zeroed. Frank could hear them calling to each other in Arabic, coordinating, getting ready to rush the position. His team had maybe 2 magazines left per man. After that, it was knives and fists and dying hard. Then he heard it. The scream of a Harrier jump jet coming in low and fast. Ground team, Viper 2-1. Tally your IR strobe. Confirm no friendlies within 100 meters of target building. Frank looked at the structure the Republican Guard was using for cover. 70 meters, maybe 75, well inside the danger zone. Viper 2-1, that's negative. We're 70 meters from target, too close. A pause. Frank could almost hear her thinking through it. Calculating. The Harrier screamed overhead and Frank saw it. Sleek, deadly, loaded with ordnance that could vaporize everything in a 100-meter radius. Ground team, I can put it on target, but I need you to trust me. Frank looked at Brennan. The chief nodded once. Viper 2-1, you're cleared hot. We trust you. Copy. Rifle. The AGM-65 Maverick missile came off the rail with a sound like God clearing his throat. Frank buried his face in the sand and prayed to a deity he wasn't sure he believed in. The explosion was biblical. Heat washed over them even at 70 meters. The shockwave picked Frank up and slammed him back down. His ears rang like church bells on Sunday morning. When he looked up, the building was gone. Just gone. The Republican Guard positions, silent. Viper 2-1's voice crackled through his headset. Ground team, target destroyed. You boys okay down there? Frank keyed his mic. His hands were shaking. Viper 2-1, that was textbook danger close. Where'd you learn to fly like that? Pensacola, same as everybody else. Stay safe down there, gentlemen. The Harrier banked away, afterburner lighting up the dawn sky. Brennan looked at Frank, sand covering half his face, and started laughing. The kind of laugh that comes after you've looked death in the eye, and death blinked first. A woman just saved our asses, Frankie. Frank watched the Harrier disappear into the sunrise. Something shifted in his chest. a belief he'd held his entire life, cracking like old concrete. "Yeah, Chief. Yeah, she did." Franklin Castellano was 68 years old now, and the desert was just a memory that visited him in dreams. The restaurant he'd opened in 1995, Castellanos, simple name for a complicated man, sat on a corner in downtown San Diego where the sailors and the civilians mixed like oil and water that somehow found a way to blend. The walls told stories, photographs from Panama where he'd earned his trident, Desert Storm where he'd learned that courage had no gender, Mogadishu where he'd earned the Medal of Honor and lost 3 friends in the same afternoon, Afghanistan where he'd finally hung up his kit and decided to live long enough to get old. Every photograph was a ghost. Every ghost was a brother. Friday night at Castellanos meant something. It meant the restaurant was full. The kitchen was chaos in Frank's corner booth. The one by the window where you could see the whole room stayed empty until the right person walked through the door. His staff knew the rule. The regulars knew the rule. That booth was reserved for warriors who'd earned it. Not the ones who talked about their service at every opportunity. The quiet ones. The ones who carried it in their eyes instead of on their sleeves. Behind the bar, in a shadow box mounted between bottles of top-shelf bourbon, sat a Medal of Honor. Navy, Mogadishu, October 3rd, 1993. Frank never talked about it. The medal spoke for itself. Blue ribbon with 13 white stars, the highest honor a nation could give. It reminded every drunk with a big mouth that this wasn't the kind of place where you cause problems. Most nights. Jenny Callahan, 19 years old with her mother's red hair and her father's stubborn streak, worked her way through nursing school one Friday night shift at a time. Frank liked her, reminded him of his daughter if he'd had one. She was quick with a smile and quicker with a tray, navigating the Friday crowd like she was running an obstacle course. "Frank," she called from the service window, "corner booth's still empty. You expecting someone?" Frank checked his watch. 7:30. She was late. Unusual for her. "She'll be here." "The mystery woman," Jenny grinned. "You know, everyone's got theories, right? Some people think she's your daughter. Some think she's CIA. Tommy in the kitchen swears she's Secret Service." Frank just smiled. Let them theorize. The truth was simpler and more complicated than any of their guesses. The door opened. Frank knew her walk before he saw her face. Measured. Aware. The walk of someone who'd spent too long in places where inattention got you killed. Catherine Sullivan, Cade to the people who knew her, lieutenant to the people who served with her, pushed through the Friday crowd like she was navigating hostile territory. Which, Frank supposed, civilian life might as well be for someone like her. She wore a simple black dress that looked uncomfortable on her frame. Too formal. Too restrictive. Frank had never seen her in anything but uniform or workout clothes until she'd come home from deployment. Watching her try to be civilian was like watching a wolf try to be a house pet. It just didn't fit. She was 32 years old with auburn hair pulled back tight, green eyes that tracked every movement in the room, and the kind of lean muscle that came from carrying 80 pounds of gear through mountains where the air was too thin to breathe. "Your booth's been waiting, Sully." Frank used the nickname he'd given her 9 years ago, when she'd first walked into his restaurant asking questions about Bood/S that most people didn't have the courage to ask. Cade's smile was small, genuine, the first real expression Frank had seen on her face since she'd come home. "Thanks, Frank." She moved to the corner booth, and Frank watched her scan the room before she sat down. Old habits, combat habits, the kind that kept you alive in Helmand Province but made you look paranoid at an Italian restaurant in San Diego. Every exit marked, every person assessed, threat level calculated and recalculated with every movement. Frank brought her water without being asked. Another ritual. "Chicken Parmesan tonight? Is that even a question? Just checking if 18 months in the sandbox changed your taste." Cade's expression flickered. Something dark passed behind her eyes. the deployment, the things she couldn't talk about, the things that woke her up at 3 in the morning with her heart pounding and her hand reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. Nothing's changed, Frank, but they both knew that was a lie. Everything had changed. She'd left San Diego as Lieutenant Catherine Sullivan, Navy SEAL, operator, warrior. She'd come back as something else, something harder, something that didn't quite fit in the civilian world anymore. Frank had seen it before, in Panama, in Somalia, in Afghanistan. You went to war and you came back, but the part of you that came back wasn't quite the same as the part that left. The percentages were different. More warrior, less person. More operator, less human. The transition broke people. Frank had watched it happen. Good operators, great warriors, who came home and couldn't figure out how to be anything else, who drove too fast and fought too hard and pushed away anyone who tried to get close, because closeness meant vulnerability, and vulnerability meant death. That's why he'd started the Friday night tradition. The corner booth, the free meal, the hour of peace where warriors could just exist without having to explain themselves. "I'll put your order in." Frank started to turn away, then stopped. "Sully?" "Yeah?" "It's good to have you home." Cade's throat worked. She nodded once. Couldn't seem to manage words. Frank left her alone. She needed space. Space to breathe. Space to remember that the restaurant was safe, that San Diego was home, that the war was 6,000 miles away, even if it didn't feel like it. The restaurant filled up as evening turned to night. Friday crowd, mix of sailors from the naval base, civilian couples on date night, families celebrating something or just wanting good Italian food and cold beer. Frank worked the room like he'd worked operations. Aware, observant, reading the crowd. Most people were easy. Couples holding hands, families with kids who couldn't sit still, sailors fresh off deployment, still walking like they expected the ground to move under them. Then 3 men walked in at 8:15, and Frank's internal alarm started ringing. He'd been reading people for 40 years. Combat did that, taught you to assess threats before they became threats. And these 3 men radiated problem like a heat signature through thermal optics. Marcus Hendricks, 42 years old, real estate developer, brother to city councilman Robert Hendricks. Custom suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Watch that cost more than most people's cars. The kind of man who'd never been told no in his entire life and wouldn't know what to do with it if he was. Blake Sutton, 35, corporate lawyer, nephew to federal judge William Sutton. Expensive haircut, expensive shoes, expensive everything. The kind of lawyer who won cases by grinding people down, not by being right. Tyler Brennan, 38, investment banker, the kind who'd foreclosed on widows and orphans and slept fine at night because the numbers made sense, even if the morality didn't. They were already drunk. Not falling down drunk, but loud drunk. Aggressive drunk. The kind of drunk where inhibitions were gone, but coordination was still there. The dangerous zone. Frank watched them settle at the bar, flagging down Jenny for drinks. Watch the way Marcus's eyes followed her. Watch the way Blake grinned at something Tyler said. His instincts screamed. But Marcus Hendricks was city councilman Hendricks' brother, and Frank had learned the hard way that powerful people's relatives got handled with kid gloves unless you wanted your business license challenged and your permits held up in bureaucratic purgatory. So Frank watched and waited and hoped they'd drink their drinks and leave. In her corner booth, Cade was trying to eat chicken parmesan and failing. The food was perfect. Frank's chef knew his business, but her attention kept drifting. To the 3 men at the bar, to their body language, to the way they were looking at Jenny. She tried to ignore it, tried to focus on the food, on the blessed normalcy of Friday night in San Diego, where nobody was shooting at you. And IEDs weren't hidden in every pile of trash. But her training wouldn't let her relax. Couldn't let her relax. In Helmand Province, inattention got you killed. The insurgent you didn't see put a bullet through your teammate's head. The threat you dismissed because you were tired ended your deployment in a black bag. So she watched, tracked, assessed. The three men's voices carried across the restaurant, loud jokes, crude comments. The kind of humor that stopped being funny somewhere around high school, but some men never outgrew. Jenny brought their drinks. Marcus grabbed her wrist when she set his scotch down. Not hard, not violent, just familiar, possessive. The kind of grab that said he could. Jenny pulled away smoothly, professional smile locked in place. But Cade saw the tightness around her eyes, the way her shoulders tensed. Frank saw it too, started moving toward the bar. Marcus released Jenny's wrist, laughing at something Blake said. Frank stopped, waited. The grab had been inappropriate but brief, correctable. The kind of thing you could address with a quiet word to a drunk customer, rather than an escalation. Cade forced herself to breathe, in through the nose, out through the mouth. Combat breathing, the kind that kept your heart rate down when adrenaline wanted to spike it into the stratosphere. Not your problem, not your fight, just eat your dinner. But her hand had drifted to her thigh, where her sidearm would be if she was in country, where her knife would be if she was in kit, where there was nothing but black fabric and civilian helplessness. She hated that feeling, hated being unarmed in a room full of potential threats, hated that her brain couldn't stop running threat assessments on every person in the restaurant. At 8:45, the door opened again. A young couple walked in, dressed nicely, clearly nervous about something. Anniversary maybe, special occasion, the kind of date where you save up and go somewhere nice and hope the night lives up to the anticipation. Bridget O'Neill was 24 years old with blonde hair and her grandmother's Irish features. Medical student at UCSD, 3 years in, drowning in debt and coffee, and the kind of exhaustion that came from caring too much about people you couldn't save. Ryan McKenzie, 26, graphic designer, Scottish-American, the kind of guy who still got nervous on dates, even though they'd been together for 2 years. He'd been planning this night for weeks. Corner table, wine he couldn't really afford, the ring in his pocket that he'd been carrying for a month, waiting for the perfect moment. They were seated 2 tables from Cade's booth, close enough that she could hear their nervous conversation. The way Ryan stuttered over the wine selection, the way Bridget laughed and touched his hand. Young, innocent, the kind of couple that still believed the world was fundamentally good and people were fundamentally kind. Marcus noticed Bridget immediately. Cade saw his head turn, saw the way his eyes traveled, saw Blake lean in and whisper something that made Marcus grin. The predator had spotted prey. Cade's appetite died. She set down her fork, chicken parmesan forgotten. Every muscle in her body went still. Not tense, still. The kind 30 people in the restaurant, and every single one of them hoping someone else would handle it. Frank was in the kitchen, dealing with a crisis about overcooked pasta. Jenny was taking orders at another table, deliberately avoiding the bar. The moment stretched, tightened. Then Marcus stood up. Cade's heart rate stayed perfectly steady at 60 beats per minute. Combat heartbeat, the kind that only happened when your training was so deep it became instinct. Marcus walked to Bridget and Ryan's table, unsteady on his feet but not stumbling, drunk enough to lose inhibition, sober enough to be dangerous. He leaned over Bridget's chair, close, too close, the kind of close that violated every boundary of personal space and knew it. Evening, his breath probably reeked of scotch. Couldn't help but notice you from across the room. Bridget's face went pale. Ryan's jaw clenched. "We're on a date," Ryan said, polite, firm. The kind of firmness that came from a man who'd never been in a real fight, but knew he was supposed to stand up for his girlfriend. Marcus ignored him completely, spoke directly to Bridget. "That dress looks amazing on you. Really showcases your assets." The restaurant went quiet. Not silent, but that particular kind of quiet where conversations died and silverware stopped clinking because everyone was suddenly listening while pretending not to. Bridget's hands shook. Please leave us alone. Just being friendly. Marcus's hand went to the back of her chair. Proprietary. No harm in a compliment, right? Ryan stood up. 5'10", maybe 170, soaking wet. Graphic designer hands that had never thrown a punch in anger. I asked you politely, please leave my girlfriend alone. Marcus finally looked at him, really looked at him, and smiled. The kind of smile that came right before the violence. What are you going to do about it, kid? Blake and Tyler were already moving, flanking, cutting off exits, the pack surrounding the prey. Cade was on her feet before her conscious mind registered the decision. Muscle memory, training, the part of her brain that had kept her alive through 3 deployments taking control. She moved through the restaurant like water. Smooth. Inevitable. No wasted motion. Marcus grabbed Bridget's arm, yanked her out of her chair. She cried out, more shock than pain, but it didn't matter. That was the line. Excuse me. Cade's voice cut through the restaurant. Not loud, just clear, authoritative. The voice she used to give orders under fire. Marcus turned, still holding Bridget's arm. Saw a petite woman in a black dress. 5'6", maybe 130. No threat, no danger. He laughed. Sit down, sweetheart. Adults are talking. Cade stopped 3 feet away, perfect striking distance. Her hands stayed loose at her sides. Body language non-threatening, but ready. Release her. Return to your seats. Now. The word now carried weight, command weight, the kind that came from someone used to being obeyed. Blake stepped toward Cade, aggressive, trying to intimidate. Mind your business, lady, before you get hurt. He shoved her shoulder, not hard, just enough to make a point, just enough to assert dominance. It was the worst mistake of his life. Time didn't slow down. That was a myth. But Cade's perception accelerated, the way it always did when violence became inevitable. The world didn't move slower, she just processed faster. Blake's shove came from his right hand, pushing her left shoulder. Forward momentum, weight committed, balance compromised. Cade's left hand trapped his wrist. Kotegashi, the wrist turn that every SEAL learned in close quarters combat. Her right hand went to his elbow. Mechanical advantage, leverage over strength. She rotated counterclockwise. Blake's arm bent at an angle. Arms weren't designed to bend. His body followed to protect the joint. She controlled his fall, preventing his head from hitting the table edge. But gravity and momentum still drove him face first into the floor. Hardwood met cheekbone with a sound like a drumstick hitting a cutting board. Elapsed time, 2 seconds. Marcus released Bridget, lunged at Cade with both hands reaching for her throat. Adrenaline-fueled, sloppy, the kind of attack that worked on people who panicked. Cade sidestepped, minimal movement, just enough. Her right hand formed a spear, Nukaite strike to the brachial plexus, the pressure point where the shoulder met the neck. Precision over power, nervous system disruption. Marcus's legs stopped obeying his brain. He crashed into the empty table Bridget and Ryan had been sitting at. Dishes shattered, glass broke. He tried to stand and couldn't. His legs just wouldn't work. Elapsed time, 6 seconds. Tyler ran for the exit. Self-preservation. Smart if he'd committed to it. But he hesitated, looked back, saw his friends on the ground and decided to be brave. He charged at Cade from behind. Heavy footsteps, no stealth. She heard him coming like thunder before lightning. Cade turned, used his own momentum, Taiotoshi, the body drop throw that every martial art taught for a reason. She became the pivot point. Tyler became the weight that had nowhere to go but down. She controlled his fall. Could have spiked him head first. Could have let him break his neck. Instead, she swept his supporting leg and guided him into a controlled descent that left him conscious but breathless on the floor near the entrance. Elapsed time, 15 seconds. 3 men on the ground, 1 woman standing, 30 witnesses who'd stopped breathing. The restaurant was silent. Cade's heart rate, 62 beats per minute. She immediately dropped to one knee beside Bridget, who'd stumbled backward against the wall when Marcus released her. "Are you injured? Do you need medical attention?" Her voice was calm, gentle. The combat instructor voice, the one she used on traumatized locals after firefights. Bridget stared at her with eyes wide as dinner plates. How did you?" "Breathe. You're safe now. Are you hurt?" Ryan was frozen 3 feet away, still standing, still holding his dinner napkin, his brain trying to process what had just happened. All around them, the restaurant erupted. Voices, shouts, movement. "Someone call the police. Did you see that? Three guys, oh my God. Is she military? Has to be. Nobody moves like that." Frank pushed through from the kitchen, took in the scene in a single glance. 3 men on the ground, one groaning, one trying to stand, one still. Cade kneeling beside Bridget, checking her for injuries with the practiced efficiency of a combat medic. He pulled out his phone, called 911. His voice was steady. "SDPD, this is Franklin Castellano at Castellano's restaurant on 5th. I need officers for an assault. 3 men attacked a female patron. Another patron intervened. Suspects are still on scene." Marcus was trying to stand. His legs were starting to work again. Blake was on his hands and knees, blood running from his nose. Tyler sat against the wall by the entrance, holding his ribs. All 3 were staring at Cade like she just materialized from thin air. Cade finished checking Bridget. No injuries. Scared, shaking, but physically fine. She turned to Ryan. "Sir, your girlfriend is unharmed. You should sit down. Shock sometimes hits delayed." Ryan's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "Thank you," was all he managed. Marcus found his voice first, loud, indignant, the voice of a man who'd never faced consequences in his life. "That woman attacked us. She's insane. Someone call the cops. I want her arrested." Blake was wiping blood from his face. "My uncle is Judge William Sutton. You're finished. Finished." The other diners weren't having it. They'd seen everything. They'd been silent during the assault, but now they found their voices. "You grabbed that girl. She asked you to leave her alone. You attacked first. I got the whole thing on video." That last one came from a man in a Navy dress uniform, Commander's Eagles on his collar, holding up his phone. "Crystal clear footage of the whole incident. You 3 assaulted that young woman. This lady defended her." Marcus's face went purple. "You don't know who you're dealing with. My brother is City Councilman Hendricks. I'll have this whole restaurant shut down." Frank stepped forward. 68 years old, 5'10", not particularly imposing, but something in his eyes, the same thing that was in Cade's eyes, made Marcus stop talking. "Your brother, the councilman?" Frank's voice was quiet. "I've got his number. Should I call him? Ask him if he wants to know his brother was assaulting a young woman in my restaurant?" Sirens wailed in the distance. Getting closer. Cade stood, moved away from Bridget and Ryan, positioned herself where she could watch the 3 men and the door simultaneously. Not threatening, just aware. Her hands were completely steady. No shaking, no adrenaline crash, just the calm that came from doing exactly what you were trained to do, exactly when you were supposed to do it. The police arrived 4 minutes after Frank's call. 2 officers, 1 female, 1 male. The female officer, Margaret O'Brien, 38, former Army MP, Iraq veteran with 2 deployments, walked in with her hand near her service weapon and her eyes scanning for threats. She saw 3 men on the ground, 1 woman standing calm as Sunday morning, and 30 witnesses all trying to talk at once. "Everyone quiet," O'Brien's command voice cut through the chaos. "One at a time. Who called this in?" Frank raised his hand. "I did. Franklin Castellano. I own this restaurant." O'Brien's eyes went to the shadow box behind the bar. The Medal of Honor. Her expression shifted. respect. Chief Castellano.
Want to tell me what happened?
Frank pointed to Marcus, Blake, and Tyler. Those three men assaulted that young woman. He pointed to Bridget. That woman stopped them. He pointed to Cade. Marcus was on his feet now, swaying but upright. That's a lie. She attacked us. The Navy commander with the phone stepped forward. Officer, I have clear video of the entire incident. Those three men harassed the young couple, physically grabbed the woman, and attacked this lady when she intervened. She acted in self-defense. O'Brien looked at Cade, really looked at her, saw the stance, the awareness, the controlled breathing. Ma'am, are you military? Cade met her eyes. Active duty Navy. O'Brien's partner, Jake Mitchell, 29, rookie fresh out of the academy, was getting witness statements. Every single person said the same thing. The three men started it. The red-headed woman finished it. O'Brien pulled out her radio. Dispatch, I need the security footage from Castellano's restaurant pulled, and I need 3 ambulances on standby. She turned to Frank. You have cameras? 4 angles, all digital, all backed up to cloud storage. I need to see that footage. Frank led her to the back office. The footage was even clearer than the phone video. 4 angles showing everything. Marcus harassing Jenny, the 3 men watching Bridget, Marcus approaching their table, the grab, the yank, Cade's intervention, Blake's shove. And then 15 seconds of the most controlled violence O'Brien had seen outside of combat training videos. Jesus Christ, she whispered. She's a SEAL, isn't she? Frank didn't answer. Didn't need to. O'Brien returned to the main dining room. Her decision was made. Marcus Hendricks, Blake Sutton, Tyler Brennan, you're all under arrest for assault and battery, disorderly conduct, and public intoxication. Marcus's face went red. This is ridiculous. We're the victims here. O'Brien's expression could have frozen lava. Sir, I have 4 camera angles and 30 witnesses that say otherwise. You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it. As she cuffed Marcus, Blake pulled out his phone with his free hand, hit speed dial. Uncle William, it's Blake. I need you, now. Some woman attacked us and the cops are... O'Brien took his phone, added it to evidence. Blake's face went white. That's my uncle, Judge William Sutton. Federal court, you have no idea what you're doing. O'Brien finished cuffing him. Actually, sir, I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm arresting 3 men for assault. Your uncle's position doesn't change what you did. But O'Brien was a 15-year veteran of SDPD. She knew how the system worked. She knew that federal judge William Sutton could make problems. Big problems. She looked at Cade, still standing calm and controlled by the corner booth. Ma'am, I need a statement from you. Cade nodded. Professional, concise, military bearing. I observed 3 males harassing restaurant staff and other patrons. They physically assaulted a female patron, grabbing her and removing her from her seat against her will. I verbally instructed them to release her and return to their seats. They refused. One of the males physically assaulted me by shoving my shoulder. I responded with minimum necessary force to neutralize the threat and prevent further harm to the victim. O'Brien wrote it down word for word, textbook report language. Ma'am, I need your name and contact information. Lieutenant Catherine Sullivan, Navy SEAL Team 3. The restaurant went silent again. Whispers rippled through the crowd. A female SEAL, one of less than a dozen in the entire United States military. O'Brien's expression shifted from respect to something like awe. Lieutenant Sullivan, this is clearly self-defense. You're not being charged with anything. But given who men are connected to, I need you to understand there might be legal complications. Cade's expression didn't change. I understand, officer. I'll cooperate fully with any investigation. As the 3 men were led out in handcuffs, Blake was already on his phone again. The officer had returned it, calling his uncle. Marcus's voice echoed from the patrol car. This isn't over. My brother will bury you, all of you. The patrol cars pulled away, sirens fading into the San Diego night. The restaurant slowly returned to normal. Conversations resumed, dinners continued, but everyone kept glancing at Cade. The woman in the corner booth who dropped 3 men in 15 seconds and never raised her voice. Frank brought her a fresh plate of chicken parmesan. The original had gone cold during the incident. On the house, Sully. Cade tried to smile, failed. Her hands were finally shaking, not from fear, from the adrenaline dump that always came after, the body's delayed response to violence. She'd come home from Afghanistan hoping for peace, for normalcy, for one quiet dinner where she could pretend to be civilian. Instead, one moment of action had ignited something she couldn't control. And the battle ahead would be fought in courtrooms, not combat zones, a war that would test her in ways Helmand Province never had. The video hit the internet at 11:47 p.m. Some anonymous diner with a smartphone and a social media account uploaded it with a caption that read, "Navy SEAL woman drops 3 guys in 15 seconds at San Diego restaurant. Holy shit." By midnight, it had 200,000 views. By 2 a.m., it had crossed 1 million. By sunrise, it was at 8 million and climbing. Cade woke at 0500 like she always did, despite not falling asleep until 3. Military circadian rhythm didn't care about insomnia or viral videos or the fact that her entire life was about to get dissected by strangers on the internet. Her apartment was small, Spartan, unpacked duffel in the corner, government-issue furniture. The kind of place that looked like someone was just passing through because, in her mind, she always was. 18 months deployed, 6 months home. 18 months deployed, 6 months home. The cycle had defined her adult life. She made coffee, strong, black, the kind that tasted like battery acid and regret, but delivered caffeine like an IV drip. Her phone sat on the counter where she'd left it, powered off. She'd learned that trick in Afghanistan. When the chaos got too loud, you turned off the noise. She turned it on. 47 missed calls, 132 text messages, 63 voicemails. The first call was from Captain Lawrence Davis, her commanding officer at SEAL Team 3. Sensitive, 0615. Sullivan, it's Captain Davis. Call me back. ASAP. The second was from a number she didn't recognize. Reporter from CNN. The third was from another unknown number. NBC. The fourth was Frank. Sully, don't turn on the TV. Don't read the news. Call me when you're up. She ignored the advice and turned on the television. Her face was on every morning news show. The security footage from Castellanos playing on loop. 15 seconds of violence replayed in slow motion, analyzed frame by frame, debated by people who'd never been in a fight in their lives. Clearly excessive force, said one expert, a man in a suit who'd probably never thrown a punch outside a boxing gym. Textbook self-defense, said another, a woman with military bearing and ribbon rack that said she'd earned her opinions. The debate raged. Twitter was on fire. Reddit threads stretched into thousands of comments. YouTube reaction videos were already hitting 6 figures. Female SEAL, restaurant, 3 men, 15 seconds. The algorithm loved it. Cade's phone rang. Captain Davis again. She answered. Lieutenant Sullivan. Sullivan, what the hell happened last night? Davis didn't sound angry, just tired. The kind of tired that came from dealing with politics instead of operations. 3 civilians assaulted a female patron at a restaurant. I intervened. They attacked me. I defended myself. SDPD has the full report and security footage. I've seen the footage. Everyone's seen the footage. It's gone viral. Cade closed her eyes. Sir, I didn't ask for that. I know, but we've got a problem. The brass is divided. Half of them are proud, female SEAL defending a civilian, exemplifying the warrior ethos. The other half is worried about optics, a trained special operator using combat techniques on drunk civilians. Sir, with respect, they weren't just drunk. They were violent, and one of them was armed. A pause. Armed? SDPD found a folding knife on one of the suspects. It fell during the altercation. Davis exhaled. That's not in any of the reports I've seen. It will be. Officer O'Brien logged it as evidence. Okay, that helps. But Sullivan, I need you to understand. Judge William Sutton is Blake Sutton's uncle. Federal judge. Serious political connections. He's already making calls. There's going to be legal pushback. I acted in self-defense, sir. I believe you. The footage supports you. But this is going to get messy. The kind of messy where lawyers get involved. I need you to get a lawyer. A good one. Understood, sir. And Sullivan, lie low. No media, no statements, no social media. You're on administrative leave pending investigation. Not disciplinary, just precautionary. Administrative leave, the military's way of saying, sit in the corner while we figure out if you're a hero or a liability. How copy, sir? Copy all. And Sullivan, off the record, I would have done the same thing. The call ended. Cade sat in her apartment as the sun rose over San Diego, watching strangers debate whether she was a hero or a monster. Her coffee had gone cold. Across town in a penthouse overlooking the harbor, Blake Sutton sat in his uncle's study with an ice pack on his face and murder in his eyes. Federal Judge William Sutton was 67 years old, silver-haired, and possessed the kind of power that came from 40 years on the federal bench, and a Rolodex that included senators, corporate executives, and people who made problems disappear. He sat behind a mahogany desk that cost more than most people's cars and steepled his fingers while his nephew recounted the incident. She attacked us unprovoked, Blake said. His nose was broken. His pride was worse. Assaulted 3 unarmed men. She's military trained. That makes her a deadly weapon. We could have been killed. Judge Sutton listened, didn't interrupt. 40 years on the bench had taught him that people revealed more when you let them talk. Marcus's brother is already spinning it politically, Blake continued, but we need more than politics. We need legal action, criminal charges, civil suit. We need to destroy her. The judge picked up a remote, turned on the television. The footage played again. 15 seconds. 3 bodies. Tell me something, Blake. The judge's voice was measured, calm, the kind of calm that preceded verdicts. Did you put your hands on her first? Blake hesitated. She was interfering. Did you put your hands on her first? Yes or no? I pushed her shoulder to get her to back off. So you initiated physical contact with a woman who had verbally asked you to stop assaulting another woman. Uncle William, the judge held up a hand. Silence fell like a gavel. I've watched this footage 20 times. Every angle. You 3 were drunk. You harassed staff. You physically grabbed a young woman. When another patron intervened verbally, you escalated to physical contact first. But she's military trained. That should matter. It does matter. It matters that she showed remarkable restraint. Each strike was measured, controlled, non-lethal. If she wanted to kill you, Blake, you'd be dead. Blake's face went red. Whose side are you on? Judge Sutton stood, walked to the window, looked out over San Diego Harbor where Navy ships sat at dock. I'm on the side of the law, and the law is clear. Self-defense is legal when someone initiates physical violence against you, which you did. So you won't help? The judge turned. His expression was granite. I didn't say that. I said the law is clear. But the law has gray areas, and those gray areas can be exploited by the right attorney with the right argument. He picked up his phone, dialed a number from memory. Carson? William Sutton, I need you to take a case. High profile, challenging, very lucrative. Blake smiled. Carson Wright was the most expensive, most ruthless defense attorney in California. If anyone could turn this around, it was him. The judge continued, I need you to argue that a Navy SEAL's combat training constitutes a deadly weapon under California law. that their use of force should be held to a different standard than ordinary citizens. On the other end of the line, Carson Wright was already calculating billable hours. "When can you meet?" the judge asked. "This afternoon, my office." The judge hung up, looked at his nephew. "I'll get you the best legal representation money can buy, but Blake, understand something. This isn't about winning. It's about making her life hell, about bleeding her dry with legal fees, about making an example." "What kind of example?" "That in this country, powerful people don't get humiliated by soldiers playing hero, even if the law says they were wrong." Frank got the call at 10 a.m. Hannah Pierce, former Navy JAG officer, now in private practice specializing in military legal defense. She'd heard about the case, everyone had heard about the case, and she was offering representation pro bono. "Chief Castellano, I've seen the footage. Lieutenant Sullivan acted in textbook self-defense. But Judge Sutton is making calls. There's going to be legal action. She needs representation." Frank was at the restaurant, dealing with a different kind of chaos. News vans parked outside, reporters trying to get in, customers coming just to see where it happened. "She'll need to agree to it," Frank said. "But I'll talk to her." "Do it soon." Carson Wright filed a countersuit this morning. He's arguing that Lieutenant Sullivan's SEAL training makes her a deadly weapon under California law, that she should be held to a different standard of force. Frank's jaw clenched. "That's horse shit." "It's creative horse shit, and it might work if we don't counter it properly." "What do you need from me?" "I need you to testify, character witness, and I need you to help me build a defense team. Military experts, combat psychologists, people who can explain to a jury what SEAL training actually means." Frank looked at the walls of his restaurant. Photographs of warriors, brothers, sisters, people who'd served and sacrificed and come home to a country that sometimes forgot what they'd given. "I'll make some calls." Hannah Pierce hung up and immediately started building her case. She'd been a JAG officer for 12 years before going into private practice. She knew military law, she knew combat, and she knew that this case was about more than one woman defending herself in a restaurant. It was about whether warriors were allowed to come home. The first call Frank made was to Colonel James Morrison. Hammer Morrison was 72 years old, retired Marine Corps, Force Recon commander during Desert Storm. He lived in Coronado now, close to the beach, close to the base, close to the brotherhood he'd never really left. "Hammer, it's Frank Castellano." "Frankie, hell, I saw the footage. That your girl?" "She's my mentee, SEAL, good operator, best I've seen." "I remember her. Joint training exercise, what, 6 years ago? Tactical mind like a steel trap. Made my boys look like amateurs on the land nav course." "She's being sued. Judge William Sutton's nephew. They're arguing her training makes her a deadly weapon." The line went quiet. Then Hammer's voice came back, cold as winter steel. "They're arguing that being good at your job makes you guilty of assault?" "That's the play. What do you need?" "Expert testimony. Someone who can explain to a civilian jury what SEAL training actually is, what restraint looks like, why her response was minimum necessary force." "You got it. Send me the details. I'll clear my calendar." Frank's second call was to Dr. Elizabeth Webb. She was 62 years old, former Army psychologist who'd specialized in combat stress and warrior mentality. She'd served in Gulf War, Iraq, Afghanistan. She'd evaluated thousands of soldiers, Marines, sailors, airmen. She knew the psychological profile of someone trained to kill and the difference between that training and murderous intent. "Dr. Webb, it's Frank Castellano. We met at the memorial service for Chief Ramos." "I remember. How can I help you, Chief?" Frank explained the situation, the restaurant, the footage, the lawsuit. "They're going to argue PTSD," Dr. Webb said immediately. "They'll say her deployment experiences made her violent, hypervigilant, unable to distinguish real threats from perceived ones." "Can you counter that?" "Absolutely. Combat trauma creates withdrawal and hypervigilance, not unprovoked aggression. Violence avoidance is the hallmark, not violence seeking. And the footage shows someone in complete control. That's not PTSD, that's training working exactly as designed. Will you testify? Send me her service record and psychological evaluations. I'll build a profile that shows exactly what the jury needs to see. Frank's third call was to someone unexpected. Captain Michael Briggs had been a lieutenant 9 years ago when Cade went through BUD/S. He'd been skeptical of women in SEAL training, openly skeptical. The kind that made female candidates' lives harder because he believed he was protecting the integrity of the program. Then he'd watched Cade Sullivan refuse to quit through Hell Week while men twice her size rang the bell. "Captain Briggs, it's Frank Castellano." A pause. "Chief Castellano, I heard about Lieutenant Sullivan. I need a favor. I need you to testify about her character, her training, what she went through in BUD/S. Another pause, longer this time. "Chief, I gave that woman hell during training. I didn't think she belonged. I made that clear." "I know. That's why your testimony will matter. You opposed her. She changed your mind. Not with politics, with performance." Briggs exhaled. "She made me question everything I believed about women in combat. Everything I'd thought was fact turned out to be bias." "Will you testify to that?" "I'll testify that Catherine Sullivan is one of the finest warriors I've had the privilege to train, and that anyone questioning her restraint has never seen her without it." Frank hung up. 3 witnesses, 3 perspectives. The old guard, Hammer Morrison, who'd learned to respect women in combat. The psychologist, Dr. Webb, who understood the warrior mind. The convert, Captain Briggs, who'd opposed and been proven wrong. It was a start, but Frank knew Carson Wright, knew his reputation, knew that the legal battle ahead would be as brutal as any combat operation. He picked up his phone. Dialed Cade. "Sully, it's Frank. Don't argue. You're staying at my place above the restaurant until this blows over." "Frank, I can't." "Someone spray-painted baby killer on your apartment door this morning. Building manager called me. You're not safe there." Silence on the line. "Pack a bag. I'll pick you up in 20 minutes. Cade's apartment had been vandalized. The words were in red paint, dripping down her door like blood. Baby killer, the calling card of people who hated the military and everything it represented. She stared at it for a long moment, felt nothing. The words were just sounds. The paint was just color. None of it was real compared to the things she'd seen downrange. But she packed a bag anyway, because Frank was right. This was going to get worse before it got better. The news cycle had turned. The initial hero narrative was fragmenting. Think pieces appeared questioning military violence. Op-eds debated whether combat veterans should be allowed to use force in civilian settings. Twitter threads argued about PTSD and danger and whether warriors could ever really come home. One particularly viral tweet read, "If you're trained to kill, you're a weapon. Weapons don't get to decide when to fire. Navy SEAL or not, she committed assault." It had 40,000 likes and climbing. Another read, "3 unarmed men are in the hospital because a trained killer decided to play hero. This is why we need to question military worship culture." 25,000 likes. The narrative was shifting. The video was the same, the facts were the same, but the story being told was changing. From hero to threat. From defender to aggressor. From warrior to weapon. Cade sat in Frank's apartment above the restaurant, watching her life get dissected by strangers, and felt the walls closing in. Her phone buzzed. Text from a number she didn't recognize. "Lieutenant Sullivan, this is Bridget O'Neill, the woman from the restaurant. I need to talk to you, please." Cade stared at the message. Bridget, the victim, the woman she'd defended. She typed back, "When and where?" The response came immediately. "Coffee shop on Market Street, tomorrow, 10 a.m. Please come. I need to thank you." Cade set the phone down. Wondered if Bridget had seen the news, if she knew that half the country thought Cade was a monster for saving her. Frank came up from the restaurant with 2 plates of food, chicken parmesan. Their Friday night ritual moved to Monday afternoon because the world had gone insane. "You okay, Sully?" Cade looked at him. This man who'd mentored her through BUD/S prep, who'd given her a corner booth and a safe space, who defended her to cops and customers, and now was building a legal defense team. "All I wanted was one quiet meal, Frank. One night where I could just be normal." He set the plates down, sat across from her. "I know, kid, but normal's hard to find when you've got a warrior's heart." They ate in silence. Outside, news vans still circled. Inside, 2 warriors tried to pretend the world wasn't burning. At 10 p.m., Blake Sutton's legal team released a statement. "Our clients, Marcus Hendricks, Blake Sutton, and Tyler Brennan, were victims of an unprovoked assault by a trained military operative. While we respect the service of our armed forces, we cannot allow combat-trained individuals to use lethal techniques on unarmed civilians. We are pursuing all legal remedies, both criminal and civil, to ensure justice is served." The statement was carefully worded. Trained military operative instead of Navy SEAL. Lethal techniques instead of self-defense. Unarmed civilians instead of drunk men who assaulted a woman. Language shaped narrative. Narrative shaped perception. By midnight, the statement had been picked up by every major news outlet. By 2 a.m., Twitter had turned it into a trending topic. #SEAL assault. The hashtag filled with opinions. Some supported Cade, most didn't. The algorithm favored outrage over nuance, anger over accuracy. Cade didn't sleep, just lay in the unfamiliar bed in Frank's apartment, listening to the city outside, wondering how 15 seconds of doing the right thing had turned into this. Her phone buzzed at 3 a.m. Text from Captain Davis. "Sullivan, classified mission details from your deployment leaked online. Someone in DOD is investigating. This is bad. Call me when you're up." She sat up, read the message again. Classified mission details. Leaked. That wasn't accidental. That was intentional. That was someone with access and motivation trying to bury her. She opened a private browser, searched her name. The details were vague, but damaging. Lieutenant Sullivan participated in classified operations in Afghanistan that resulted in civilian casualties. No context, no explanation that every operation had been cleared through command, that every engagement had been reviewed, that war was messy and civilians died, and it haunted every operator who'd been there. Just the implication, the suggestion, SEAL, civilian casualties, violence. The narrative was complete. She wasn't a defender, she was a killer. And killers couldn't be trusted in civilian spaces. Cade closed the browser, sat in the dark. Somewhere in San Diego, Judge William Sutton was making more calls, pulling more strings, turning the machinery of power against one woman who'd made his nephew look weak. Somewhere in Coronado, Hammer Morrison was reviewing footage and building testimony. Somewhere in Pacific Beach, Dr. Webb was analyzing psychological profiles. Somewhere in Point Loma, Captain Briggs was questioning everything he'd ever believed about warriors and worth. And in a coffee shop on Market Street, Bridget O'Neill was preparing to say something that would change everything. But Cade didn't know that yet. All she knew was that she defended someone who needed defending, and the world had decided she was the villain. The coffee shop meeting was at 10 a.m. Cade arrived 15 minutes early, scanned the exits, assessed the crowd. Old habits. Bridget walked in at exactly 10, blonde hair pulled back, dark circles under her eyes. Ryan wasn't with her. She saw Cade, walked over, and immediately started crying. "I'm so sorry," Bridget said. "I'm so sorry." Cade blinked. "For what?" "For what they're doing to you. For the news. For the lawsuit. This is my fault. If I just ignored them." "Stop." Cade's voice was gentle but firm. You did nothing wrong. They assaulted you. That's on them. Bridget wiped her eyes. I need to tell you something. About that night. About why it mattered. She pulled out her phone, showed Cade a photo. A man in Marine Corps dress blues. Older, 50s. Ribbon rack that told stories. My father, Bridget said. Lieutenant Colonel Patrick O'Neill. He served in Desert Storm, Somalia, Iraq. Cade looked at the photo, something familiar in the face. He died 3 years ago, heart attack. But before he died, he told me stories about the people he served with, the warriors who had his back, who he'd trust with his life. Bridget swiped to another photo. Younger man, Marine uniform, desert camouflage. My brother, First Lieutenant Sean O'Neill, KIA, Afghanistan, 2019. Roadside IED. Cade's chest tightened. When those men grabbed me, Bridget continued, voice shaking, I froze. I was terrified, and I thought, my father would be so disappointed. My brother would be ashamed. I couldn't even defend myself. That's not. But then you stood up, and you didn't freeze. You saw someone who needed help, and you helped. Just like my father would have. Just like my brother did. Tears streamed down Bridget's face. So I need to testify. I need to tell the truth. Those men attacked me. You saved me. And I won't let them destroy you for doing what was right. Cade sat back, felt something crack in her chest. The wall she'd built between military and civilian, between warrior and person. Thank you, she managed. Bridget reached across the table, squeezed Cade's hand. My father always said the best warriors protect without being asked. You proved that. You're exactly the kind of person he spent 30 years trying to be. They sat in that coffee shop for an hour, talked about fathers and brothers and the weight of service, about coming home and not knowing how to be civilian, about carrying the memories of the ones who didn't make it back. When Bridget left, Cade felt something she hadn't felt since the restaurant. Hope. Small, fragile, but there. She called Hannah Pierce. I have a witness, the victim. She wants to testify. Hannah's voice brightened. That's good. That's very good. But we need more. We need to build a complete picture. Your service, your training, your character. What do you need from me? Everything. Every deployment, every operation, every evaluation. I need to show the jury who you really are. Cade closed her eyes. Some of it's classified. I know. We'll work around it. But I need you to trust me. Trust. The hardest thing for a warrior to give. Okay, Cade said. I'm in. The war was just beginning. But for the first time since that Friday night, Cade wasn't fighting alone. She had Frank. She had Hannah. She had witnesses who believed in her. And somewhere in San Diego, the old guard was mobilizing. Warriors who'd served and sacrificed and understood what it meant to come home to a country that didn't always understand what you'd given. The legal battle would be brutal. But Cade had survived Hell Week. 3 deployments, firefights and IEDs, and nights where she didn't think she'd see morning. She could survive this too. She had to. Because if she didn't, it meant that warriors couldn't come home. That training made you a weapon instead of a guardian. That doing the right thing got you punished. And Cade refused to accept that world. So she'd fight, not with fists this time, with truth. The federal courthouse in downtown San Diego was built from concrete and glass, designed to intimidate. It succeeded. Cade stood on the steps at 8 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, watching news vans circle like vultures, and tried to remember her breathing exercises. In through the nose, hold for 4, out through the mouth. Combat breathing, the kind that kept your heart rate down when bullets were flying and your team was counting on you to make the shot. Except there were no bullets here, just cameras and microphones and reporters shouting questions she'd been instructed not to answer. Lieutenant Sullivan, do you regret using violence? Are you worried about going to jail? Do you think SEALs should be allowed to act as vigilantes? Hannah Pierce touched her elbow. Eyes forward, don't engage. Let the evidence speak. They pushed through the crowd. Security checkpoint, metal detectors, the machinery of justice grinding forward whether you were ready or not. The courtroom was packed. Gallery filled with faces Kay didn't know, and a few she did. Frank sat in the front row, dress uniform pressed sharp enough to cut, Medal of Honor ribbon on his chest. Beside him, Hammer Morrison in Marine Corps dress blues, Dr. Webb in professional suit, Captain Briggs in navy whites. The warriors had shown up. Across the aisle, Marcus Hendricks sat with his lawyer, Carson Wright. Blake Sutton beside him, nose still bandaged. Tyler Brennan at the end, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else. Behind them, Judge William Sutton sat in the gallery. Not presiding, that would be a conflict of interest, but present, watching. His expression promised consequences. The bailiff stood. All rise for the Honorable Judge Evelyn Martinez. Everyone stood. Judge Martinez walked in and Cade felt something shift in her chest. The judge was 58, 5'4", with steel gray hair and the bearing of someone who'd earned every inch of authority she possessed. Her robe couldn't hide the ramrod posture, the way she moved with economy and purpose. Military. Had to be. The judge sat. Everyone else followed. Be seated. Case number 24 CR 8847. The People versus Hendricks, Sutton, and Brennan. Related Civil Matters Sullivan counterclaim. Counsel, are we ready to proceed? Hannah Pierce stood. Ready for the defense, Your Honor. Carson Wright stood. Ready for the plaintiffs, Your Honor. Judge Martinez looked at both lawyers over reading glasses that made her look like a disapproving grandmother who could also probably kill you with a ballpoint pen. Before we begin, let me make something clear. This courtroom will be conducted with decorum. I've seen the media circus outside. I've read the social media commentary. None of that matters here. Only evidence. Only facts. Only law. Am I understood? Yes, Your Honor, both lawyers said in unison. Good. Mr. Wright, your opening statement. Carson Wright stood, adjusted his tie, walked to the jury box with the confidence of a man who'd won 200 cases and lost maybe 5. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is about accountability. My clients, Marcus Hendricks, Blake Sutton, and Tyler Brennan, are 3 successful businessmen who went out for drinks to celebrate a business success. They ended up in the hospital. He paused. Let that sink in. The defendant, Lieutenant Catherine Sullivan, is a highly trained Navy SEAL. She has undergone years of combat training, hand-to-hand combat, lethal force techniques. She has been deployed to war zones where killing is not just permitted, but expected. Wright walked along the jury box, making eye contact. On the night in question, there was a verbal disagreement at a restaurant. Words were exchanged. Things got heated. But here's the critical fact. My clients were unarmed. Intoxicated, yes. Loud, perhaps, but unarmed. He turned to face Cade. Lieutenant Sullivan inserted herself into a situation that did not involve her. And when one of my clients merely touched her shoulder, a touch, ladies and gentlemen, not a punch, not a grab, just a touch, she responded with military combat techniques that left 3 men on the floor in 15 seconds. Wright pulled out a remote. The courtroom screen lit up with the security footage. Watch this carefully, frame by frame. This is not self-defense. This is a trained killer using lethal techniques on civilians. This is what happens when we allow military training to be used outside of military contexts. The footage played. Silent. Brutal in its efficiency. The defense will argue she was protecting someone, that she acted appropriately, but I ask you to consider, when does training become a weapon? When does a person's skill level make them culpable for a different standard of force? Wright faced the jury fully. Lieutenant Sullivan is a weapon, a human weapon, and weapons don't get to decide when to fire. That's what this case is about. Accountability, standards, and whether we're going to allow trained military operatives to assault civilians and call it heroism. He sat down. The courtroom was silent. Hannah Pierce stood. She was 50 years old, former JAG officer, and she prosecuted war crimes in Iraq. Carson Wright was good. She was better. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Wright just showed you 15 seconds of video. Let me show you what happened in the 20 minutes before those 15 seconds. She pulled out her own remote. Different footage, earlier timestamp. This is Marcus Hendricks grabbing a 19-year-old waitress's wrist. Watch her face. See the fear? The jury watched. Jenny Callahan's discomfort was obvious even in grainy security footage. This is the three men watching Bridget O'Neill, a 24-year-old medical student, making comments loud enough that other diners complained. More footage, the predatory watching, the crude gestures. And this is Marcus Hendricks grabbing Bridget O'Neill and yanking her from her seat against her will, while her boyfriend tries unsuccessfully to stop him. The grab, the yank, Bridget's face contorted in fear. Now watch what happens next. Lieutenant Sullivan approaches. She doesn't attack, she speaks. Release her, return to your seats. Verbal intervention, de-escalation attempt. The footage continued. Cade's approach, her body language non-threatening. And here, this is Blake Sutton shoving Lieutenant Sullivan's shoulder. This is the moment of first contact, not initiated by Lieutenant Sullivan, initiated by Mr. Sutton. Hannah paused the footage at the exact moment of contact. Mr. Wright wants you to believe this is about a trained military operative attacking civilians. Let me tell you what this is really about. This is about three intoxicated men who assaulted a young woman, about another woman who had the training and courage to stop them, and about powerful people who got embarrassed and are trying to rewrite history. She walked along the jury box. You will hear from witnesses, from the victim, from military experts who will explain that Lieutenant Sullivan used minimum necessary force, that every technique she employed was designed to stop the threat without causing permanent harm. You will hear from character witnesses who will testify that Lieutenant Sullivan is exactly the kind of person we want protecting our communities. Hannah faced the jury directly. And when you've heard all the evidence, you will see the truth. That on that Friday night, Lieutenant Sullivan did exactly what warriors are supposed to do. She saw someone in danger. She intervened. She used her training not to harm, but to protect. And the only people who should be held accountable are the three men who started this by assaulting Bridget O'Neill. She sat down. Judge Martinez looked at both lawyers. Call your first witness, Miss Pierce. The defense calls Officer Margaret O'Brien. Officer O'Brien took the stand. Sworn in, sat with military posture that said former service even before Hannah asked. Officer O'Brien, you were first on scene the night of the incident? Yes, ma'am. Responded to a call about an assault at Castellano's restaurant at approximately 9:15 p.m. What did you observe when you arrived? Three males on the ground, conscious but injured. One female standing near a young couple, checking the female victim for injuries. Multiple witnesses all trying to speak at once. What did the witnesses tell you? Unanimously that the three males had harassed restaurant staff, physically assaulted the young woman, Bridget O'Neill, and that the female intervener acted only after being physically attacked herself. Hannah pulled up the body cam footage. This is your body cam, correct? Yes, ma'am. The footage played. O'Brien's arrival, Cade's immediate medical assessment of Bridget, her calm demeanor, her professional statement. Officer O'Brien, in your professional judgment, did Lieutenant Sullivan act in self-defense? Absolutely. Textbook self-defense. She verbally warned first, only used physical force after being assaulted, and her force was proportional and controlled. Hannah paused. You're a veteran yourself, correct? Yes, ma'am. Army Military Police, 2 tours in Iraq. In your military experience, how would you characterize Lieutenant Sullivan's response? restrained. If she wanted to cause serious harm, all three men would be in intensive care or worse. Instead, they had bruises, a broken nose, and wounded pride. One more thing, Officer O'Brien. You logged evidence at the scene, correct? Yes, ma'am. Hannah produced a sealed evidence bag. Can you identify this? That's a folding knife recovered from Tyler Brennan during the incident. 4-inch blade. It fell from his jacket during the altercation. The courtroom murmured. This wasn't in Wright's narrative. So one of the unarmed civilians was carrying a weapon? Yes, ma'am. No further questions. Carson Wright stood for cross-examination. He was good. He went after the knife. Officer O'Brien, was this knife open or closed when you found it? Closed, sir. Was there any evidence Mr. Brennan attempted to use it? No, sir. So as far as you know, Lieutenant Sullivan had no knowledge this knife existed? That's correct, sir. So she couldn't have been defending against a knife attack? No, sir, Wright smiled. No further questions. But Hannah stood for redirect. Officer O'Brien, does the presence of a concealed weapon change your assessment of the threat level these three men posed? Absolutely. Armed individuals, even with concealed weapons, represent a higher threat. And does the fact that Lieutenant Sullivan neutralized a potentially armed threat without even knowing it existed speak to her training? Yes, ma'am. It speaks to exceptional situational awareness and threat assessment. Thank you. No further questions. The morning continued. Witness after witness. The Navy commander who'd filmed the incident. Other diners who'd seen the harassment. The restaurant staff who'd been intimidated. Every testimony built the same picture. 3 drunk men, escalating aggression, a young woman assaulted, and Cade doing what needed to be done. At noon, Judge Martinez called recess. Cade sat in the courthouse cafeteria with Hannah, picking at a sandwich she couldn't eat. You're doing fine, Hannah said. Just sit there, look professional. Let the witnesses do the talking. When do I testify? This afternoon. Wright will come at you hard. He'll try to rattle you, make you emotional. Don't let him. I've been interrogated by Taliban fighters. I think I can handle a lawyer. Hannah smiled. Taliban fighters don't have law degrees and 40 years of courtroom experience. Stay calm. Answer only what's asked. Don't elaborate. At 1 p.m., court resumed. Hannah called her expert witnesses. Colonel James Morrison took the stand in full dress blues. 72 years old, chest full of ribbons that told stories of Panama, Desert Storm, Somalia, Silver Star, Bronze Star with V device, Purple Heart with 2 oak leaf clusters. The jury sat straighter just looking at him. Hannah walked him through his credentials. 35 years Marine Corps, Force Recon Commander, military legal consultant. Colonel Morrison, you've reviewed the security footage of the incident? Yes, ma'am, multiple times, frame by frame. In your expert military opinion, was Lieutenant Sullivan's use of force appropriate? Hammer Morrison looked directly at the jury. Appropriate doesn't cover it. It was exemplary. Each strike was measured, controlled, designed to neutralize the threat with minimum harm. If she wanted to kill those men, they'd be dead. If she wanted to maim them, they'd be crippled. Instead, they walked out of there with bruises. Can you explain to the jury what SEAL training entails? SEAL training is the most rigorous military training in the world. 6 months of basic underwater demolition/SEAL training, then another 18 months of SEAL qualification training. They learn everything from underwater demolition to close quarters combat to advanced weapons systems. In hand-to-hand combat? Extensive. SEALs train in multiple martial arts, Krav Maga, Muay Thai, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but more importantly, they train in combat decision-making. When to use force, how much force, when to disengage. Hannah paused. Colonel, you've trained with Lieutenant Sullivan, correct? Yes, ma'am. Joint exercise 6 years ago. SEAL Marine interoperability training. What was your assessment of her? Morrison's expression softened. Best tactical mind I've seen in 40 years. Not strongest, not fastest, but smartest. She thinks 3 moves ahead, anticipates, adapts. That's what makes a great operator. Colonel Morrison, I need to ask you something personal. You initially opposed women in SEAL training, correct? Wright stood. Objection, relevance. Judge Martinez looked at Hannah. Ms. Pierce? Your Honor, the defense is establishing that military resistance to women in combat roles was overcome by demonstrated competence. It speaks to Lieutenant Sullivan's character and earned respect. I'll allow it. Overruled. Hannah turned back to Morrison. Colonel? Morrison took a breath. Yes, ma'am. I opposed women in combat roles for 30 years. Wrote letters to Congress. Testified before Senate committees. I believed women lacked the physical capacity and mental toughness. What changed your mind? Lieutenant Sullivan changed my mind. I watched her carry a 200-pound wounded Marine 2 miles under fire in Helmand Province. Watched her make command decisions under pressure that saved lives. Watched her earn the respect of every operator she served with. His voice grew stronger. I was wrong. Not about standards. Standards should never change, but I was wrong about who could meet them. Lieutenant Sullivan met every standard, exceeded most. She didn't demand respect, she earned it, with blood and sweat and competence. The courtroom was silent. And the night at the restaurant? Hannah asked. That was a SEAL doing exactly what SEALs are trained to do. Assess threat, protect innocent, use minimum necessary force. Mission success with 0 collateral damage. Textbook. Carson Wright's cross-examination was aggressive. Colonel Morrison, you said you opposed women in combat for 30 years. Why? I believe they lacked the physical capacity. And you changed your mind because of one woman? I changed my mind because one woman proved my assumptions were wrong. But most women couldn't do what Lieutenant Sullivan does, correct? Most men can't either. SEAL training has a 75% attrition rate. It's not about gender, it's about individual capability. Wright switched tactics. Colonel, you're personally invested in defending Lieutenant Sullivan, aren't you? I'm invested in defending the truth. But you've advocated for women in combat roles. Your testimony serves your political position. Morrison's expression went cold. The kind of cold that came from decades of hard decisions. Counselor, I don't have political positions. I have positions earned through 40 years of watching warriors bleed. Lieutenant Sullivan is a warrior. What happened in that restaurant was a warrior protecting someone who couldn't protect themselves. If you can't see that, no amount of legal maneuvering will help you. Wright had no response to that. Dr. Elizabeth Webb testified next. Former Army psychologist, specialist in combat psychology and warrior mentality. She explained PTSD, explained that combat trauma creates withdrawal and hypervigilance, not unprovoked aggression. Violence avoidance is the hallmark, not violence seeking. The security footage shows someone in complete control, Dr. Webb testified. Heart rate probably stayed below 70 beats per minute. No panic, no rage, just trained response to a genuine threat. She showed graphs, studies, data from thousands of combat veterans. If Lieutenant Sullivan suffered from PTSD severe enough to make her violent, she wouldn't be cleared for active duty. The Navy's psychological screening is extensive. She passed every evaluation. Wright tried to poke holes. But she refused VA counseling, didn't she? Many veterans refuse counseling. It doesn't indicate pathology. Often it indicates stoicism or concern about career impact. So she prioritized career over mental health? Dr. Webb's expression sharpened. She prioritized service over stigma. There's a difference. The afternoon wore on. Testimony built layer upon layer. Captain Michael Briggs took the stand, described Hell Week, Cade's refusal to quit, her help to struggling teammates. I told her she didn't belong in SEAL training, Briggs testified. I was wrong. She proved me wrong. He paused, looked directly at the jury. I need to tell you something else, something I'm not proud of. 9 years ago, I wrote a formal letter to my commanding officer. I recommended that Catherine Sullivan be removed from SEAL training. I called her, his voice caught. I called her a quota filler and a liability to team integrity. That letter is in her permanent record. The courtroom went silent. Wright leaned forward, sensing opportunity. Briggs continued. I wrote that letter because I believed it. I was convinced women couldn't meet our standards. And then I watched her carry a 240-pound trainee, a man who'd twisted his ankle during Hell Week, half a mile to medical, on her back, while other male candidates quit around her. He looked at Cade. She didn't know I'd written that letter, still doesn't know the specifics. But I've spent 9 years trying to make up for my ignorance by ensuring every SEAL I train understands that merit has no gender. Lieutenant Sullivan taught me that, the hard way. And I'm proud to have been wrong, he finished quietly. Then Hannah called Bridget O'Neill. Bridget walked to the stand in a simple blue dress, blonde hair pulled back, hands shaking slightly as she was sworn in. Hannah's voice was gentle. Ms. O'Neill, can you tell us about the night of February 23rd? Bridget took a breath. My boyfriend Ryan and I went to Castellanos for our anniversary. We were celebrating 2 years together. What happened when you arrived? We were seated, ordered wine. We were nervous, happy nervous, because Ryan was going to propose. She pulled out a small box from her purse. Inside, an engagement ring. He never got the chance. The jury leaned forward. 3 men at the bar were loud, drunk, making crude comments about me. Ryan asked them to stop. They ignored him. Then one of them, Marcus Hendricks, came to our table. What did he do? He leaned over my chair, said inappropriate things about my body, about my dress. I asked him to leave us alone. He grabbed my arm and pulled me out of my seat. Bridget's voice broke. I was terrified. Ryan tried to stop him, but the other 2 men blocked him. I thought they were going to drag me out of the restaurant. I froze. I couldn't move, couldn't scream, just froze. What happened next? Lieutenant Sullivan stood up. She walked over and asked them to release me. Her voice was calm, firm, not threatening, just authoritative, like a teacher telling students to behave. How did the men respond? Marcus laughed at her, told her to sit down, that men were talking. One of his friends, Blake Sutton, pushed her shoulder. Bridget looked directly at the jury. That's when everything changed. She moved so fast. 3 seconds, and they were all on the ground. Then she was next to me, checking if I was hurt. Her hands were gentle. Her voice was soft. She said, "You're safe now. Breathe." Tears streamed down Bridget's face. I haven't felt safe since my brother died in Afghanistan, since I lost the person who was supposed to protect me. But that night, Lieutenant Sullivan made me feel safe, and I won't let these men destroy her for doing what was right. Hannah's next question was quiet. Ms. O'Neill, your father and brother both served? My father was Lieutenant Colonel Patrick O'Neill, Marine Corps, Desert Storm, Somalia, Iraq. My brother was First Lieutenant Sean O'Neill, KIA, Afghanistan, 2019. What would they think of Lieutenant Sullivan's actions? Bridget smiled through tears. My father always said the best warriors protect without being asked. Lieutenant Sullivan proved that. She's exactly the kind of person he spent 30 years trying to be. Carson Wright's cross-examination was brutal. Ms. O'Neill, you said you froze, couldn't scream. How do you know the men intended to drag you out? They were hurting me. Did they say they were going to drag you out? No, but did they make any verbal threats? They didn't have to, their actions. Please answer the question, yes or no. Did they verbally threaten you? No, so you assumed intent based on fear, not fact. Bridget's face flushed. I know what I felt. I'm sure you did. Fear is real. But feelings aren't facts, Ms. O'Neill. For all you know, Mr. Hendricks was pulling you up to apologize for being inappropriate. The courtroom erupted. Judge Martinez banged her gavel. Order, Mr. Wright, you're dangerously close to contempt. Wright backed off, but the damage was attempted. Hannah's redirect was surgical. Ms. O'Neill, when a man grabs your arm and yanks you from your seat against your will, what would you call that? Assault. And when someone stops an assault, what would you call that? Defense. Thank you. No further questions. At 4 p.m., Judge Martinez called the day's session. We'll resume tomorrow at 9 a.m. Dismissed. Cade left the courthouse surrounded by Frank, Hannah, and the witnesses. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed. The circus continued. That night, Cade sat in Frank's apartment and watched the news coverage. The narrative was shifting. Bridget's testimony had been powerful. The expert witnesses had been credible. The knife revelation had damaged Wright's unarmed civilians argument. But Twitter was still divided. Reddit threads still argued. Half the country saw a hero, half saw a threat. Her phone buzzed. Text from Captain Davis. Watching the trial, you're representing the teams well. Proud of you, Sullivan. Another text. From a number she didn't recognize. Lieutenant Sullivan, this is Lieutenant Commander Sarah Vance, SEAL Team 7. Every female operator is watching this trial. You're fighting for all of us. Don't quit. Cade set the phone down, felt the weight of it. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. The next morning, Hannah called Cade to the stand. The defense calls Lieutenant Catherine Sullivan. Cade stood, walked to the witness stand, was sworn in, sat with military bearing, hands folded, expression neutral. Hannah started gently. Lieutenant Sullivan, tell the jury about your background. I'm 32 years old, born in Boston. My father was Sergeant Thomas Sullivan, Army Ranger. He died before I was born, killed in the Beirut barracks bombing in 1983. My mother was 3 months pregnant with me. You never knew your father? No, ma'am. Just stories, photographs, the flag they gave my mother. What made you join the Navy? I wanted to serve like he did, to understand who he was through what he did. And you became a SEAL? Yes, ma'am. Applied for BUD/S at 23. Graduated in 2016. Assigned to SEAL Team 3 in 2017. Hannah walked through her career. 3 deployments, 47 combat operations, multiple decorations, Bronze Star with V device for valor under fire. Lieutenant Sullivan, on the night of February 23rd, why did you intervene? Cade looked at the jury. I saw 3 intoxicated males harassing restaurant staff. Then I saw them physically assault a young woman. I assessed the threat, made the decision to intervene, used verbal de-escalation first, only used physical force after being assaulted myself. Walk us through your decision-making in those 15 seconds. Cade's voice was calm, professional. The briefing voice she used after operations. Blake Sutton initiated physical contact by shoving my shoulder. I assessed him as immediate threat, used Kotegashi wrist lock and controlled takedown to neutralize without permanent injury. Marcus Hendricks lunged next. I used lateral movement and brachial plexus strike to disrupt his nervous system. Non-lethal, temporary. Tyler Brennan approached from behind. I used Tai Otoshi body throw with controlled descent to prevent head injury. You controlled their falls? Yes, ma'am. Could have spiked them. Could have targeted joints for permanent damage. Chose not to. Mission was neutralize threat, not cause harm. Lieutenant, why did you get involved? Why not just call the police? Cade paused, chose her words carefully. I took an oath to support and defend against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Those 3 men were enemies of Bridget O'Neill in that moment. I had the training and capability to stop them. So I did. Hannah let that sit, then asked the critical question. Do you regret your actions that night? Cade looked directly at Marcus, Blake, and Tyler. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that 3 grown men thought they could assault a young woman without consequences. I regret that 30 other people saw it happening and did nothing. But do I regret stopping them? No, ma'am, I don't. Carson Wright's cross-examination was everything Hannah had warned about. Lieutenant Sullivan, you call yourself a warrior, correct? That's my profession, yes. And warriors kill people, don't they? In combat, when necessary and lawful, yes. How many people have you killed, Lieutenant? Hannah stood. Objection! Irrelevant and inflammatory. Judge Martinez sustained. Move on, Mr. Wright. Wright smiled. You've been deployed 3 times to Afghanistan, correct? Yes. Combat operations, enemy engagement. You fired your weapon in anger? In defense, yes. Killed enemy combatants? That's classified information. But we can assume, given your decorations and combat experience, that you've taken human life? Cade's jaw tightened. I've served my country in combat zones. The details are classified. Wright moved closer. Lieutenant, you claim you acted in self-defense, but isn't it true you could have simply left the restaurant? I could have. I chose not to. Because you wanted to fight? Because someone needed help? Or because your training took over? Because you saw a threat and your combat instincts activated? My training helped me assess and respond appropriately. Wright pulled out documents. These are psychological evaluations from your deployment. They mention hypervigilance, difficulty sleeping, nightmares. Sound familiar? Those are standard screening questions. You refused VA counseling after your last deployment, correct? I chose not to pursue it at that time. Because you didn't think you needed help? Or because you knew it would hurt your career? Cade's eyes went cold. I made a personal choice about my health care. A choice that left you traumatized and potentially dangerous in civilian settings? Objection! Hannah was on her feet. Counsel is testifying. Sustained. Mr. Wright, ask questions. Don't make speeches. Wright switched tactics. Lieutenant, you weigh approximately 130 pounds, correct? Approximately. And Marcus Hendricks weighs 240 pounds. Blake Sutton weighs 210. Tyler Brennan weighs 195. These are big men, strong men, yet you dropped all 3 in 15 seconds. How? Training, technique, leverage over strength, or because you're a weapon, a human weapon trained by the United States government to kill efficiently. Cade leaned forward slightly. Mr. Wright, if I was the weapon you claim, those 3 men would be dead. They're not. They walked out of that restaurant. That's not because I'm a weapon. That's because I'm a professional. The courtroom was silent. Wright tried to recover. But you admit you could have killed them. I could have. I chose not to. That's called restraint. Or perhaps you knew there were witnesses, cameras, that killing them would mean murder charges. Cade's voice was ice. I didn't kill them because killing wasn't necessary. I used minimum force required to stop the threat. That's what training is for, to make the right decision under pressure. Wright was losing ground, and he knew it. No further questions. Hannah stood for redirect. Lieutenant Sullivan, in your 3 deployments, have you ever used more force than necessary? No, ma'am. Have you ever been disciplined for excessive force? No, ma'am. In civilian life, before this incident, had you ever been in a physical altercation? No, ma'am. So the first time in your civilian life you used force was when you witnessed an assault? Yes, ma'am. Thank you. No further questions. Judge Martinez looked at both lawyers. Any additional witnesses? The defense rests, Your Honor, Hannah said. Wright stood. Your Honor, the plaintiffs would like to call one final witness, Marcus Hendricks. Marcus took the stand. His lawyer had coached him well. He described a different night, a misunderstanding. Too much to drink, yes, but just trying to be friendly, just complimenting a pretty girl, and then attacked by a violent woman who put all 3 of them in the hospital. His testimony was smooth, practiced, designed to appeal to sympathy. Hannah's cross-examination destroyed it. Mr. Hendricks, you said you were just being friendly to Miss O'Neill? Yes. Hannah pulled up the security footage. This is you grabbing her wrist when she served your drinks earlier. Is this friendly? Marcus shifted. I was getting her attention. By grabbing her? Without permission? It wasn't a grab, it was a touch. Hannah played more footage. This is you watching Miss O'Neill for 20 minutes, making comments to your friends. Is this friendly? We were just talking. And this? The grab, the yank. Bridget's face contorted in fear. Is this friendly? Marcus's face reddened. She was overreacting. To being grabbed and yanked from her seat by a drunk man twice her size? I wasn't going to hurt her. But she didn't know that, did she? She just knew a strange man was physically assaulting her. Marcus had no good answer. Mr. Hendricks, you called your brother, City Councilman Robert Hendricks, from the police car, didn't you? Yes. What did you tell him? That I'd been assaulted. Not that you'd assaulted someone. Not that you'd grabbed a young woman. You led with being the victim? I was the victim. Hannah's expression was withering. No, Mr. Hendricks. You were the perpetrator who got stopped. There's a difference. Closing arguments came the next day. Carson Wright spoke for an hour. Argued training. Argued deadly weapon. Argued that allowing military personnel to use combat techniques on civilians set a dangerous precedent. Hannah Pierce spoke for 30 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, this case is simple. 3 drunk men assaulted a young woman. Another woman stopped them. Everything else, the legal gymnastics, the arguments about training and weapons, is just noise designed to distract you from that simple truth. She pointed at Marcus, Blake, and Tyler. Those 3 men made a choice. To drink too much, to harass staff, to assault Bridget O'Neill. Lieutenant Sullivan made a choice too. To protect someone who couldn't protect herself. To use her training for good. To stand up when 30 other people stayed seated. Hannah walked to the jury box. Mr. Wright wants you to believe that being skilled makes you guilty, that training makes you a weapon. But by that logic, doctors would be weapons because they know how to harm. Lawyers would be weapons because they know how to destroy lives with words. Your training is a tool. Your character decides if it's a shield or a sword. Lieutenant Sullivan used hers as a shield. She paused. You've seen the evidence. You've heard the witnesses. You know what happened that night. Now you get to decide what it means. Does protecting the innocent make you a criminal? Does being good at your job make you a monster? Or does standing up when everyone else sits down make you exactly the kind of person we need more of? The defense asked for complete exoneration of Lieutenant Catherine Sullivan and justice, real justice, for the 3 men who started this by assaulting Bridget O'Neill. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Cade sat in the courthouse cafeteria with Frank, unable to eat, unable to think about anything except 12 strangers deciding her fate. At 4:30 p.m., the bailiff found them. Jury's back. The courtroom filled. Everyone stood as Judge Martinez entered. Has the jury reached a verdict? The 4 women stood. We have, Your Honor. In the matter of assault charges against Marcus Hendricks, Blake Sutton, and Tyler Brennan, how do you find? Guilty on all counts, Your Honor. The courtroom erupted. Judge Martinez banged her gavel. Order! I will have order. She turned to Marcus, Blake, and Tyler. You 3 will remain standing. Before I pass sentence, I want to say something. The courtroom went silent. I served in Iraq, 2nd Infantry Division. I carried an M4 carbine through Fallujah. I know what training does to a person. I know what combat does to a person. And I know the difference between someone who's dangerous and someone who's dangerous when they need to be. She looked directly at them. You 3 assaulted a young woman in a public place. When stopped, you used your connections, your powerful families, your expensive lawyers, to try to destroy the woman who stopped you. You argued that her skill made her guilty, that her training made her a weapon. But here's what you missed. Judge Martinez's voice grew harder. Lieutenant Sullivan is a weapon the United States government spent millions of dollars and years of training to create, a weapon designed to protect American citizens from threats, foreign and domestic. And on that Friday night, you three became a domestic threat. So that weapon did exactly what it was designed to do. It protected an American citizen. She picked up her gavel. Marcus Hendricks, you are sentenced to 18 months in federal prison, followed by 3 years probation, anger management counseling, and a restraining order preventing contact with Ms. O'Neill, Lieutenant Sullivan, and Castellano's restaurant. You will also pay $50,000 in restitution to Ms. O'Neill and Lieutenant Sullivan's legal fees. Marcus's face went white. Blake Sutton, you are sentenced to 15 months in federal prison, followed by 3 years probation. Additionally, I am recommending your disbarment to the California State Bar. Your behavior demonstrates a fundamental lack of character required for the practice of law. Same restitution and restraining orders apply. Blake looked like he might vomit. Tyler Brennan, you are sentenced to 12 months in federal prison, plus an additional 6 months for the concealed weapon charge. Same probation, counseling, restitution, and restraining orders. She banged the gavel. As for the civil complaint against Lieutenant Sullivan, it is dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, I am awarding Lieutenant Sullivan damages in the amount of $100,000 for malicious prosecution, to be paid jointly by the 3 defendants. Another gavel bang. Lieutenant Sullivan, this court thanks you for your service, both overseas and here. You did nothing wrong. In fact, you did everything right. Case dismissed. The courtroom exploded. Reporters rushed out to file stories. Veterans in the gallery stood and applauded. Frank grabbed Cade in a bear hug. Cade stood there, numb, trying to process that it was over. Outside the courthouse, news crews waited. Hannah gave a brief statement. Cade stood beside her, saying nothing, letting the verdict speak. Marcus, Blake, and Tyler were let out in handcuffs. Their expensive suits couldn't hide the perp walk shame. Marcus saw the cameras and shouted, "This isn't over, my brother." A U.S. Marshal told him to be quiet. Judge William Sutton left through a side entrance. His nephew was going to prison. His reputation was damaged. And he couldn't do a damn thing about it. The fallout extended beyond the courtroom. Within 2 weeks, City Councilman Robert Hendricks faced a recall petition signed by 12,000 constituents. The restaurant security footage had gone viral again, this time with his brother's face highlighted. He lost his seat in a special election 3 months later, defeated by a former Navy corpsman who ran on a platform of accountability. Tyler Brennan's banking license was revoked by the California Department of Financial Protection after an emergency review. The concealed weapon charge, combined with the assault conviction, violated financial industry ethics standards. His name was added to a permanent ban list. Blake Sutton's disbarment proceedings moved swiftly. The California State Bar cited moral turpitude and conduct unbecoming an officer of the court. He'd spent 15 years building a legal career. It ended in a 7-minute hearing. And Judge William Sutton, the man who'd orchestrated the countersuit, who'd made calls to senators and leaked classified information to the media, faced a judicial ethics investigation. Federal marshals served him with a subpoena 2 days after the verdict. He announced his retirement 3 days later, citing health reasons. Nobody believed him. The federal bench didn't mourn his departure. 6 months later, Cade stood in front of a BUD/S class at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado. "My name is Lieutenant Catherine Sullivan. 3 months ago, after the trial concluded, I was promoted to senior chief. The Navy's way of saying they believe in what I did that night. I'm here to teach you about appropriate use of force and when restraint is more important than aggression." The class was mixed. 23 men, 3 women. All of them looked at her with a combination of respect and curiosity. Some of you saw the video from the restaurant. Some of you followed the trial. Here's what I want you to understand. Your training is a tool, the most powerful tool you'll ever possess. Your character decides whether it becomes a shield for the innocent or a sword for ego. Choose wisely. She looked at each candidate. You're going to learn how to kill people, efficiently, quietly, in 100 different ways. But more importantly, you're going to learn when not to, because anyone can pull a trigger. Only warriors know when not to. The class was silent. Hell Week starts Monday. Some of you will quit. Most of you will quit. The ones who make it through won't be the strongest or the fastest. They'll be the ones who understand that being a SEAL isn't about being tough. It's about being smart, disciplined, and knowing that with great capability comes great responsibility. After the class, one of the female candidates approached. Young, nervous, determined. Senior Chief Sullivan, I just wanted to say thank you for fighting that case, for showing us that female SEALs can serve and come home and still defend themselves without being labeled as threats. Cade smiled. What's your name? Emma Reeves, ma'am. Well, Emma Reeves, don't thank me yet. Thank me after you survive Hell Week. I will, ma'am. Cade watched her go, saw herself at 23, saw the determination, the fear, the absolute refusal to quit. That evening, Cade sat in her corner booth at Castellano's. Friday night, chicken parmesan, the ritual restored. Frank brought her meal without being asked. How was the first day teaching? Good, hard, good, hard. Frank smiled, just like you. The restaurant was full. Life had returned to normal. The news vans were gone. The viral video had been replaced by newer controversies. The world had moved on. But the corner booth had changed. A small bronze plaque was mounted on the wall beside it. Simple, elegant, reserved for warriors, earned, not given. Cade touched it, felt the weight of everything it represented. A young couple walked in. The hostess tried to seat them at the corner booth. Frank intercepted. That booth's reserved. For who? Frank looked at Cade. For people who earn it. Ryan McKenzie and Bridget O'Neill, now Bridget McKenzie, walked over to Cade's booth. Senior Chief Sullivan, Ryan said. They'd gotten married 2 months ago. Frank had officiated. Cade had been in the wedding party. We were hoping you'd join us for dinner. Cade looked at the corner booth, her sanctuary, her safe space. Then she looked at Bridget and Ryan, at Frank watching with pride, at the restaurant full of people living their lives in peace. I'd like that. They sat together, 3 people bound by 15 seconds that had changed everything. Bridget was in her final year of medical school, specializing in emergency medicine. She wanted to work with trauma patients, help people in their worst moments. Ryan had started teaching self-defense classes, free, for survivors of assault, for people who wanted to feel safe. And Cade was teaching the next generation of SEALs, passing on the lessons, the discipline, the understanding that capability without responsibility was just violence. As they ate, Cade felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not the absence of conflict, but the presence of purpose. She'd gone to war. She'd come home. She'd fought a different kind of battle and won. But more importantly, she'd shown that warriors could be both. Could be protectors in combat and protectors at home. Could use their training for good. Could be weapons when necessary and guardians when possible. Frank raised his glass. To warriors. Cade raised hers. To knowing when to fight. Bridget raised hers. To people who stand up. Ryan raised his. To doing what's right even when it's hard. They clinked glasses. Outside, San Diego went about its evening. Ships in the harbor, sailors on liberty, families at dinner, the ordinary magic of civilian life. And in a corner booth at Castellano's restaurant, 4 people who understood that sometimes 15 seconds could change everything. That courage wasn't the absence of fear. That restraint was harder than violence. That warriors weren't defined by their ability to fight, but by their wisdom in knowing when not to. Cade finished her chicken parmesan, set down her fork, looked at the faces around her, and smiled. She'd just wanted dinner, but she'd earned something more: respect, vindication, community, and the knowledge that when the moment came, when someone needed defending, she'd done exactly what warriors are supposed to do. She'd stood up.